Fleet Commander Yira stood at the center of her warship's bridge, her four arms folded behind her back as she watched the stars through the massive viewing window. The Crimson Tide was the pride of the Velaran Empire, a vessel of war that had brought death to a dozen worlds. Today, it would bring death to one more. The Valorans were an ancient race. They had walked among the stars when humans were still living in caves and hunting with stones. Their bodies were covered in natural armor, hard plates of chitin that could stop a blade. They had 4 arms, each ending in claws, sharp enough to cut through metal. Their eyes could see in darkness, and their blood carried poison that killed anything foolish enough to bite them. Yira was proud of her species. She was proud of their history, their strength, their place in the galaxy. And she was amused by the reports her officers had brought her about the humans of Earth. "Play it again," she said, clicking her mandibles in what passed for a Valoran smile. Her tactical officer touched a control, and the hologram appeared once more. It showed human soldiers in training. They were small creatures, barely reaching Yira's chest. Their skin was soft and pink, without armor or scales. They had only 2 arms, 2 legs, and their bodies looked fragile enough to break with a single blow. The bridge crew laughed, a harsh clicking sound that filled the air. "These are the famous Terran warriors?" Yira asked. "These soft little things?" "Yes, Commander," her tactical officer replied. "The humans have been spreading through this sector for the past 50 years. They have colonized 12 worlds and established trade with several minor species. And they think they can challenge us? They have made no direct challenge, Commander. But they have answered the distress call from the Kepler-7 mining colony. The colony has requested their protection." Yira turned to face the window again. Outside, she could see her fleet 40 warships of the Velaran Empire, each one carrying hundreds of soldiers. They had come to take Kepler-7. The mining colony was rich in minerals that the Empire needed, and the colonists had refused to submit. They had called for help, and the humans had answered. "How many human ships?" Yira asked. "1, Commander. A single frigate. It is called the Busan." More laughter from the crew. 1 frigate against 40 warships. It was not even a battle. It was a joke. "I have heard stories about these humans," said Yira's second-in-command, a scarred veteran named Thox. "Some of the traders tell tales about them. They say that humans do not know when to quit. They say that a single human soldier once held a mountain pass against 100 Kreth raiders for 3 days. Trader stories," Yira said with contempt. "Tales to frighten hatchlings and impress fools. I have fought the Kreth. They are weak, cowardly creatures. A child could hold a pass against them. They also say," Thox continued, "that human ships continue fighting even when they are crippled, that their crews refuse to abandon ship even when death is certain, that they simply will not surrender." Yira turned to face him, her eyes narrowing. "Are you afraid, Thox? Have these stories made you nervous?" "No, Commander. I am simply reporting what I have heard. Then let me tell you what I know." Yira walked toward the hologram and pointed at the human soldiers with one clawed finger. "These creatures have no natural weapons, no claws, no venom, no armor. They cannot see in the dark. They cannot survive in vacuum. They need to breathe constantly, drink water every day, and sleep for 1/3 of their lives. They are weak, slow, and fragile." She turned back to her crew. "Whatever stories the traders tell, whatever legends the minor species whisper about, they are nothing but propaganda. The humans are a young race trying to seem more dangerous than they are. When we take Kepler-7, I will prove it. I will show the galaxy that Terran warriors are nothing special." "Yes, Commander," Thox said, bowing his head. Yira returned to her command position. "Signal the fleet. We advance on Kepler 7 inches 1 hour. The human frigate will be destroyed first. I want this to be quick and clean. The officers hurried to obey. Messages flashed between ships, and the fleet began to move into formation. 40 warships, each one bristling with weapons, each one carrying soldiers eager for battle. Against them stood one small frigate and whatever courage its crew possessed. Yira did not think about courage. She did not believe in legends or stories or tales of impossible bravery. She believed in numbers, in firepower. In the cold mathematics of war, the humans were outnumbered 40-1. They would die, and their colony would fall, and the galaxy would learn once again that the Valoran Empire was not to be challenged. A communication alert chimed on the tactical console. "Commander," the officer said, surprise in his voice. "We are receiving a transmission from the human frigate." On screen, the hologram shifted, and a human face appeared. It was a male, Yura thought, though she found it difficult to tell with these creatures. He had gray fur on his head and lines on his face that suggested age. His eyes were dark and calm, showing no fear at the fleet arrayed against him. "Valoran fleet," the human said in accented but clear galactic standard. "This is Captain Park Do-hyun of the Terran Defense Force frigate Busan. I am asking you, one time only, to withdraw from this system. The people of Kepler 7 are under Terran protection. Turn back now, and there will be no conflict." Yura stared at the image. This soft creature, commanding a single damaged frigate, was asking 40 warships to turn back. It was the most ridiculous thing she had ever heard. "You are outnumbered 40-1, she said. The human captain smiled. It was a small smile, tired but genuine. "I did not expect you to agree, Commander. But I had to ask. What happens next is on you." The transmission ended. Yira stood in silence for a moment, then clicked her mandibles again. "Brave words from a dead man. All ships, advance. Destroy the human frigate. Show them what happens to those who stand against the Valoran Empire." The fleet surged forward, and Yira watched with satisfaction. This would be quick. This would be easy. And when it was over, no one would ever again speak of Terran warriors as anything special. She could not have been more wrong. The Busan was an old ship. She had served the Terran Defense Force for 23 years, and her hull carried the scars of a dozen battles. Her paint was faded, her engines were patched in 100 places, and her weapons systems had been repaired so many times that no two cannons were exactly alike. But her crew loved her. Captain Park Do-hyun stood on the bridge and watched the Valoran fleet approaching. 40 warships, each one larger than his frigate. Each one carrying enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The tactical display showed them as red dots, spreading across the screen like a disease. "Captain," said his first officer, a young woman named Lieutenant An Mira. "They are not responding to our withdrawal request." "I did not expect them to," Do-hyun replied. "But we had to try." "What are your orders, sir?" Do-hyun looked around the bridge. He saw the faces of his crew, men and women he had served with for years. Some were young, barely out of training. Others were veterans like himself, gray-haired and tired but still ready to fight. None of them looked afraid. None of them asked to leave. "Signal the colony," he said. "Tell them to begin evacuation. Get the civilian ships moving toward the jump point. We will buy them as much time as we can." "Yes, sir." Do-hyun took a deep breath. 200 people under his command. 200 lives that he was about to throw into a battle they could not win. He had known, when he answered the distress call, that it would come to this. He had come anyway. "All hands," he said into the ship-wide communication system. "This is the captain. The Valoran fleet is not withdrawing. We are going to engage them. Our mission is to protect the civilian evacuation and buy time for reinforcements to arrive. I will not lie to you, our chances are not good. But every minute we fight is a minute more for innocent people to escape. I am proud to serve with all of you. Let us show these aliens what Terran soldiers are made of. He closed the channel and turned to his tactical officer. Take us in. Attack pattern Delta. The Busan surged forward. On the bridge of the Crimson Tide, Yira watched with disbelief. The human frigate was not running. It was not surrendering. It was accelerating directly toward her fleet, its weapons charging, its shields at full power. They are attacking? She asked, her voice filled with confusion. One ship against 40? Yes, Commander, Thox replied. They are attacking. This is madness. This is suicide. Perhaps they do not know that. The first Valoran ships opened fire. Plasma bolts and missiles streaked toward the Busan. Enough firepower to destroy a dozen frigates. Yira watched with satisfaction, waiting to see the human ship explode. It did not explode. The Busan twisted and spun through the barrage with impossible grace. Its point defense guns shot down missiles before they could hit. Its shields flared as plasma bolts slid off at angles. The ship moved like a dancer, weaving through death with a skill that Yira had never seen before. And then it started shooting back. The Busan's cannons were old, but they were accurate. The first Valoran escort ship took a hit to its engine section and began to drift. The second lost its weapons array. The third exploded completely, its reactor breached by a perfect shot. 3 ships, Yira whispered. One frigate has destroyed 3 of my ships. Commander, they are continuing their attack run. They are heading toward the center of our formation. All ships, concentrate fire on that frigate. Destroy it now. The fleet responded. Every ship turned its weapons toward the Busan. The space around the frigate became a storm of fire and light. No ship could survive that. Nothing could survive that. The Busan kept fighting. Captain Do-hyun felt his ship shaking around him. Alarms screamed. Damage reports flooded in from every section. The shields were failing. The hull was breached in 3 places. Fires were burning in the lower decks, but the evacuation was working. On his screen, he could see the civilian ships fleeing toward the jump point. Every minute he fought was another minute of life for those people. Captain, Lieutenant An reported, the Valoran flagship is launching boarding craft. They intend to take us by force. Then let them come, Do-hyun said. All Marines to defensive positions. We will not make this easy for them. The boarding craft latched onto the Busan's hull, and Valoran soldiers began cutting through the airlocks. They expected to find a broken crew ready to surrender. They found something very different. Private Yoon Tae-soon was 19 years old. He had joined the military to pay for his sister's education. He had never expected to fight aliens, but when the first Valoran came through the airlock, Tae-soon raised his rifle and fired. The Valoran was bigger than him, stronger than him. Its body was covered in natural armor that could stop a blade. But Tae-soon's rifle fired armor-piercing rounds, and the alien fell with a hole in its chest. More came behind it. Tae-soon kept firing. All across the Busan, the same scene repeated. Human Marines, outnumbered and outmatched, stood their ground and fought. They used rifles, grenades, knives, and bare hands. They fought in corridors and cargo bays and engine rooms. They died, but they took Valorans with them. On the Crimson Tide, Yira listened to the reports with growing horror. Her boarding parties were being slaughtered. The humans were not surrendering. They were fighting to the last. Commander, Thox said quietly, the frigate's reactor is failing. They should be dead. Their ship is falling apart around them. They should be dead. Then why aren't they? No answer came. The Busan finally broke apart under the concentrated fire of 30 warships. Her hull split open. Her engines went dark. She died in a flash of light and fire, taking 6 more Valoran ships with her. But Yira's scanners detected something in the debris. Small objects, moving not away from the fleet, but toward the planet below. Escape pods. The surviving humans were not fleeing. They were going to the planet's surface. They are landing on Kepler-7, Thox reported. Perhaps 80 survivors. They are heading for the northern continent. They should have run, Yira said. They should have tried to escape. Perhaps they do not know how to run. Yira stared at the planet below. Somewhere down there, 80 humans had survived. 80 soft, fragile creatures who had just destroyed 9 of her warships. 80 soldiers who refused to give up even when their ship was burning around them. For the first time in her long career, Yira felt something cold in her chest. "Prepare the ground forces," she ordered. "We are going to find those survivors. And this time, we will finish them properly." The fleet began its descent toward Kepler-7. The civilian ships had escaped, jumping to safety before the Valorans could stop them. Captain Park Do-hyun had succeeded in his mission, dying to save thousands of lives. But the battle was not over. On the planet below, Lieutenant Kim Sora gathered the survivors and looked up at the sky. The Valoran ships were coming. "Well," she said to her soldiers, "I hope you all like camping, because we are going to be here for a while." Nobody laughed. But nobody ran either. They were Terran soldiers, and they had a job to do. Giant trees reached toward the sky, their branches blocking out the sun. Strange birds called from the shadows. Insects buzzed through the humid air. It was not a friendly place for humans. It was even less friendly for Valorans. Lieutenant Kim Sora crouched behind a fallen tree and watched the alien patrol moving through the forest below. There were 20 of them, tall insectoid warriors with plasma rifles and armor that gleamed in the dim light. They moved with confidence, certain that they were the hunters in this jungle. They were wrong. Sora was 26 years old, small even by human standards. She had grown up on a farming colony, the daughter of rice farmers who had come to space looking for a better life. She had joined the military because she wanted to protect people like her parents. She had never expected to become a guerrilla fighter on an alien world. But here she was. 12 soldiers, 8 o'clock, whispered Corporal Baek Ji-hoon beside her. "They are heading toward Camp 3. "I see them," Sora replied. "Signal the others." Pattern 7. Ji-hoon touched a small device on his wrist, sending a silent vibration to the other squad members hidden in the jungle. They had learned quickly that radio signals could be detected, so they had developed their own system of silent communication. The Valorans walked into the ambush without knowing it. The first soldier fell with a knife in his throat. The second died before he could raise his weapon. By the time the patrol realized they were under attack, 4 of them were already dead. The remaining Valorans fought back, firing their plasma rifles into the jungle. Trees burst into flame. The air filled with smoke and the smell of burning wood. But the humans were already gone, melting back into the shadows like ghosts. "What is happening?" one of the Valoran soldiers shouted. "Where are they?" Nobody answered. The jungle was silent again. Back at the main Valoran camp, Commander Yira received the report with barely controlled fury. Another patrol lost. Another group of soldiers killed by creatures half their size with no natural weapons. "How many is that now?" she demanded. 112 dead in the past week, Commander, her intelligence officer reported. "The humans attack at night, when our vision is weakest. They set traps using local wildlife. They strike our supply lines and disappear before we can respond. We have 10,000 soldiers on this planet. They have 80. This should not be possible. The jungle gives them advantages, Commander. And they seem to know things about this environment that we do not." Yira turned to stare out the window of her command post. The jungle stretched before her, dark and endless. Somewhere out there, 80 humans were hiding, laughing at her, making fools of her entire army. She had given her troops 1 week to eliminate the survivors. That week had passed. The humans were still there. "They leave messages," the intelligence officer continued, his voice hesitant. "When we find our dead, There are words carved into the trees nearby. In broken Veloran script, what do the messages say? The officer swallowed. They say, "We are still here." Yura's claws dug into the table in front of her, leaving deep scratches in the metal. "We are still here." 3 words that made her blood boil. 3 words that told her these humans would not give up, would not surrender, would not stop fighting no matter what. "I will handle this myself," she said finally. "Commander, prepare my personal guard, 50 of our finest warriors. I am going into that jungle personally. I will find these humans and kill them with my own hands." "Commander, is that wise? If something were to happen to you, nothing will happen to me," Yura interrupted. "These are humans. Soft, weak creatures who got lucky a few times. I have killed dozens of enemies in personal combat. I have fought the Kreeth, the Morvans, the Silver Raiders. I do not fear anything that bleeds. And these creatures bleed like any other." She gathered her weapons, a plasma pistol, a blade for each of her 4 hands, and a personal shield generator. Her guards assembled outside, 50 of the best soldiers the Valoran Empire had ever produced. Each one was a veteran of countless battles. Each one had killed more enemies than they could count. As they prepared to enter the jungle, Yura looked at the dark trees one more time. Somewhere in there, a young human woman was waiting for her. Sora. The intelligence reports said that was her name. A former farmer's daughter who had somehow become a ghost that killed Valoran soldiers in their sleep. "I am coming for you, little human," Yura whispered. "And when I find you, I will show the galaxy what happens to those who challenge the Valoran Empire." She stepped into the jungle, and the trees swallowed her. 5 kilometers away, Sora received the report from her scouts. "The big one is coming," said Private Choi Ji-woo, a young medic who had somehow survived the crash. "The commander herself." With 50 guards, Sora nodded slowly. She looked around at her soldiers, 41 men and women, who had survived the battle in space, the crash landing, and a week of guerrilla warfare. They were tired, hungry, and running low on ammunition. Several were wounded. None of them complained. "She thinks she is hunting us," Sora said. "She thinks she is the predator, and we are the prey." "And what are we going to do?" Ji-hoon asked. Sora smiled. It was not a kind smile. "We are going to show her what humans have been doing to predators for 100,000 years." "What is that?" "We are going to hunt her back." The soldiers began to prepare. They checked their weapons, gathered their supplies, and moved deeper into the jungle. They knew these forests now, every trail, every stream, every hiding place. They knew where the dangerous animals lived and how to avoid them. They knew which plants were poisonous and which could be used for medicine. The Valorans knew none of this. They were strangers in a hostile world, hunting creatures who had spent a week learning every secret the jungle had to offer. Sora looked up at the canopy above, where the last light of day was fading into darkness. Night was coming. The Valorans could not see well at night. Humans could. "Rest while you can," she told her soldiers. "Tonight, we teach the Valoran Empire why our ancestors feared the dark and then learned to own it." The jungle grew quiet as the sun went down. Somewhere in the distance, a strange bird screamed, and in the darkness, 41 humans waited for their prey to come to them. The hunt was about to begin. The jungle at night was a different world. Shadows moved between the trees. Strange sounds echoed from every direction. The air was thick with moisture and the smell of rotting leaves. Commander Yura moved through this darkness with her 50 guards, their lights cutting through the black like small suns. She was not worried. She had hunted in darkness before. She had tracked enemies through swamps and mountains and frozen wastelands. This jungle was just another hunting ground. "Commander," one of her scouts reported, "we have found tracks, human footprints, heading northeast." "How old?" "A few hours, perhaps." Yura smiled, her mandibles clicking with satisfaction. They followed the tracks through the jungle, moving as quickly as they could through the dense vegetation. The humans were running. Yira thought. They knew she was coming. And they were afraid. Good. Let them be afraid. The first day passed without contact. Yira's guards found more tracks. More signs of human passage. Broken branches. Footprints in the mud. Scraps of cloth caught on thorns. The humans were always just ahead. Always just out of reach. They are leading us somewhere, Tox said on the second evening. They want us to follow. Then we will follow, Yira replied. And when we catch them, we will make them regret their games. On the third night, her soldiers began to disappear. The first one was a guard named Crix. He had stepped away from the group to check a suspicious noise. He never came back. They found his body an hour later, hidden under a pile of leaves. His throat had been cut. The second was a scout named Vorn. He was walking at the back of the group when something pulled him into the shadows. By the time anyone noticed he was gone, there was nothing left but blood on the ground. By morning, 7 soldiers were dead. What is happening? Yira demanded. We are 50 warriors, the finest in the Empire. How are humans killing us without being seen? Nobody had an answer. They found more bodies as the day went on. Some had been killed with knives. Others had fallen into hidden pits, lined with sharpened stakes. One had been poisoned. The humans had coated their blades with venom from a local snake. They are everywhere, one of her guards whispered. They are watching us. They are always watching. Silence, Yira snapped. They are not ghosts. They are flesh and blood. They can be killed. But even she was beginning to doubt. The humans moved through the jungle like they were part of it. They appeared from nowhere, struck without warning, and vanished before anyone could respond. They communicated with hand signals that the Valoran translators could not read. They waited for hours without moving, patient as stones, until the perfect moment to attack. On the 4th night, Yira finally saw one of them. It was a young male, limping through the trees, about 100 meters away. He was wounded, there was blood on his leg, and he was using a stick as a crutch. An easy target. An easy kill. Stay here, Yira told her remaining guards. I will handle this one personally. She moved toward the human with the silence of a predator. He did not seem to notice her. He was focused on moving forward, on escaping, on surviving. Yira could taste his fear in the air. She was 50 meters away now, 40, 30. The human stumbled and fell. He tried to get up but could not. He lay on the ground, breathing hard, waiting to die. Yira raised her blade. The world exploded around her. Gunfire came from every direction. Her guards screamed and fell. Shapes burst from the undergrowth. Humans, dozens of them, firing and slashing and killing with terrible efficiency. It was a trap. The wounded human was bait, and she had walked right into it. Yira turned to fight. Her 4 blades spun through the air, cutting down any human who came close. She was faster than them, stronger than them, better trained than them. She killed 1, 2, 3 of the creatures. A bullet hit her shoulder. Another hit her leg. She stumbled, but did not fall. More humans surrounded her. She kept fighting. Blood poured from her wounds, both red and green mixing on the jungle floor. She had never felt such pain, but she refused to stop. A human came at her from the left. She cut him down. Another from the right. She killed him too. But there were always more. They were endless, relentless, refusing to give up no matter how many she killed. Finally, a plasma blast hit the weapon in her primary hand. The blade shattered. Before she could grab another, a human tackled her from behind, sending her crashing to the ground. She tried to rise. A boot pressed down on her back. Do not move, a voice said in Galactic Standard, or I will shoot you in the head. Yira looked up. Standing above her was a small human female, holding a rifle pointed directly at her face. The human had blood on her clothes and a wound on her arm, but her hands were steady. Lieutenant Kim Sora, I assume, Yira said. You know my name. I am honored. I have been hunting you for 3 days. I know, Sora replied. We have been hunting you for 3 days too. We are just better at it. Yira looked around. Her guards were dead, all 50 of them. The jungle floor was covered with bodies, both Velaran and human. The humans had paid a heavy price for this victory, but they had won. Why? Yira asked. Why do you not just run? You cannot win. You cannot escape. Why do you keep fighting? Why do you keep fighting? Sora looked at her with something that might have been pity. It was an expression Yira had never seen on an enemy's face before. You really do not understand us at all, do you? She gestured to her soldiers. Take her weapons. Bind her wounds. She is our prisoner now. You are keeping me alive? Yira asked, surprised. Yes. Why? I am your enemy. I have killed your people. Well, Sora knelt down so that her face was level with Yira's. Her eyes were dark and tired, but there was something burning behind them. Something that Yira could not name. Because that is what humans do, Sora said. We kill when we have to, but we do not kill when we do not have to. You are going to learn the difference. She stood up and walked away, leaving Yira lying in the mud, surrounded by the bodies of her fallen guards. For the first time in her life, Commander Yira did not know what to think. These humans were not what she had expected. They were not the weak, foolish creatures the reports had described. They were something else entirely, something that scared her. Pick her up, Sora ordered. We are moving to the caves. The rest of the Valoran army will be looking for her soon. We need to be gone before they arrive. The humans lifted Yira to her feet and began marching into the jungle. She went with them, too wounded to resist, too confused to even try. The hunt was over. And somehow, impossibly, she was the one who had been caught. The caves were deep in the mountains, hidden behind a waterfall that made them impossible to detect from the air. The humans had found them during their first week on the planet, and they had turned them into a home. Commander Yira sat with her back against the stone wall, watching her captors. Her wounds had been treated, bandaged with clean cloth, cleaned with water and some kind of medicine that stung but seemed to prevent infection. She had expected torture, humiliation, perhaps slow death. Instead, she had received medical care. She did not understand. Private Choi Ji-woo, the young medic, came to check on her bandages twice a day. He was a small human, with gentle hands and a quiet voice. He asked if she was in pain. He brought her food and water. He treated her like a patient, not a prisoner. Why are you doing this? Yira asked him on the 3rd day. I am your enemy. My people are trying to kill all of you. Ji-woo looked at her with his soft human eyes. You are wounded. I am a medic. It is my job to help wounded people. Even enemies. Even enemies. He finished changing her bandage and sat back. My grandmother used to tell me that you can tell what kind of person someone is by how they treat their enemies. I want to be the kind of person she would be proud of. He left her alone with her thoughts. Over the following days, Yira watched the humans closely. She saw things that confused her. Things that did not match what she had been told about this species. She saw soldiers cry when they learned that friends had died. They held each other and spoke words of comfort. And then they picked up their weapons and went back to fighting. Grief did not stop them. It seemed to make them stronger. She saw them share their food equally, even when there was not enough. No one took more than their share. The officers ate last, after their soldiers had been fed. She saw them laugh at terrible jokes, telling stories about their homes and their families, and the lives they had left behind. They were exhausted and starving, and hunted by an army, but they still found reasons to smile. One evening, Sergeant Baek Hyun-soo sat down beside her. He was an old man by human standards, 52 years old, with gray in his hair and wrinkles around his eyes. He moved slowly, tired from years of hard work and harder fighting. "You look confused," he said. "I am," Yura admitted. "Nothing about you humans makes sense to me." Hyunsu smiled. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device, a battered datapad with a cracked screen. He touched it, and an image appeared. A human woman with dark hair, two young girls with matching smiles, and a small house surrounded by fields of some kind of grain. "My wife," Hyunsu said. "My daughters. My home. A farming colony. In the outer systems." Yura looked at the image. The woman was smiling at whoever was holding the camera. The girls were laughing. It looked peaceful. Happy. "Why show me this?" she asked. "Because I want you to understand why I am here." Hyunsu put the datapad away. "I was a farmer before the war. Rice and vegetables, mostly. I was not born to be a soldier. None of us were. War is something we learned because we had to. Then why fight? Why not run, hide, wait for rescue?" Hyunsu was quiet for a moment. "Tell me, Commander, what do your soldiers fight for?" Hyunsu, Yura thought about the question. "Glory, honor, the expansion of the empire. And that is enough? That makes them willing to die? It is the highest honor a Valoran can achieve, to die in service of the empire." Hyunsu nodded slowly. "We are different. Glory and honor mean little to us. We do not fight for expansion or conquest. We fight for something much simpler." "What?" "Those girls in the picture." Hyunsu's voice was soft but firm. "If the empire takes this world, they will not stop here. They will keep pushing, keep expanding, until eventually they reach my colony. And when they do, my daughters will become slaves or corpses. I am here to make sure that never happens." He looked at Yura with eyes that held no hatred, only determination. "We fight because if we do not, the people we love will never be safe. That is worth dying for. That is worth more than glory could ever be." Yura said nothing. She thought about her own soldiers, about the way they died bravely for the empire. They had been good warriors, loyal, and skilled. But had any of them fought with the same fire she saw in this old farmer's eyes? She was not sure. The days passed. Yura's wounds healed slowly. She learned the names of her captors, heard their stories, watched them live and fight and die. Each day brought new attacks from the Valoran ground forces, and each day the humans lost more soldiers. But they never stopped fighting. Corporal Moon Yuna was the youngest of them, just 19 years old. She should have been in school, learning and growing, preparing for a normal life. Instead, she was rigging explosives with hands that never shook, preparing for a battle she knew she might not survive. "Are you afraid?" Yura asked her one night. Yuna looked up from her work. Her face was smudged with dirt and grease, but her eyes were clear. "Of course I am afraid. Only stupid people are not afraid of death." "Then how do you keep working? How do you not freeze or run?" "My mother taught me something when I was small." Yuna went back to her explosives. She survived the colony wars, lost her leg, her home, most of her friends. But she kept going. She raised me alone, working 2 jobs, never complaining. And she always told me, courage is not about not being afraid. Courage is being afraid and standing up anyway. She finished her work and looked at Yura. "I am terrified, Commander. Every time I hear Valoran ships overhead, every time I see one of my friends die, I want to curl up and cry. But I do not. Because someone has to stand up. Someone has to be brave. And if not me, then who?" Yura did not have an answer. On the 10th day, Lieutenant Sora gathered the survivors. There were only 41 of them left now, out of the 83 who had crashed on the planet. They looked tired, thin, battered by war. But their eyes were bright, I have news, Sora said. The Valoran Empire is sending reinforcements. A full invasion force will arrive in 2 days. We cannot fight them in the jungle anymore. There are too many. The Reasonable Render. I'm founding. Rander. The soldiers were silent. They knew what this meant. There is an old mining facility on the eastern ridge. Sora continued. It has strong walls, good defensive positions, and supplies we can use. We are going to make our stand there. How long do we have to hold? Hyunsu asked. Terran reinforcements are coming, but they will not arrive for at least a week, maybe longer. Sora looked at her soldiers one by one. I am not going to lie to you. Our chances are not good, but we have survived this long. We will keep surviving until help arrives, or until we cannot fight anymore. Yuna raised her hand. What about the prisoner? Sora looked at Yura. Their eyes met. Something passed between them. Not friendship, not trust, but something like understanding. She comes with us, Sora said. She has seen who we are. Maybe, if we survive this, she can tell her people the truth about humans. The soldiers nodded and began to pack. They gathered their weapons, their supplies, their wounded. They prepared for one final journey. One final battle. One final stand against an army that outnumbered them 1,000 to 1. Yura watched them work, something cracking inside the certainty she had carried her entire life. These were not super soldiers or genetic experiments. They were teachers, farmers, medics, children, ordinary people who had chosen to stand against the impossible. And somehow, that made them more frightening than any enemy she had ever faced. The mining station sat on a rocky ridge, overlooking a valley filled with trees. It was an ugly building, made of gray metal and concrete, covered with rust and abandoned machinery. But its walls were thick, its position was strong, and it was the best chance the humans had. Lieutenant Sora stood on the roof and watched her soldiers work. They were building barricades from old mining equipment. They were setting traps on every approach. They were turning this forgotten place into a fortress. 41 soldiers against an army of 10,000. The numbers were insane. The situation was hopeless. And still they worked. Because there was nothing else to do. You know we are going to die here, Yura said from beside her. Sora did not turn. Probably. Why not run? There are caves, hiding places. You could survive for weeks, maybe months. And then what? The Velorans would still control this world. They would still threaten our colonies. Running does not solve the problem. It just delays it. Yura was silent for a moment. You really believe that? Now Sora did turn. She looked at the Veloran commander with eyes that held no fear, only quiet determination. Let me ask you something. If your daughters were in danger, if your home, your family, everything you loved was threatened, would you run? Yura thought of her own home, her clan, the people who depended on her. Would she run if they were threatened? No. She would fight until her last breath. I think I am beginning to understand, she said. The first Veloran attack came at dawn. 10,000 soldiers marched across the valley, their armor gleaming in the morning light. They had tanks and artillery and aircraft. They had numbers beyond counting. They expected to sweep over the mining station like a wave crushing a sandcastle. They were wrong. The humans had spent all night preparing their defenses. They had turned the station into a maze of traps and ambush points. Every window was a firing position. Every doorway was a kill zone, and at the center of it all stood Sora, directing her soldiers with calm precision. The first wave of Valorans charged up the ridge. Mines exploded beneath their feet. Gunfire cut them down from the windows. By the time they reached the walls, half of them were dead. The second wave fared no better. The humans had rigged the outer buildings with explosives. When the Valorans tried to use them for cover, The buildings collapsed on top of them. The third wave brought tanks. The tanks rolled up the ridge, crushing everything in their path. But Yuna had prepared for this. She had hidden explosives in the road itself. The lead tank disappeared in a ball of fire, blocking the path for the others. By noon, the Valorans had lost over 1,000 soldiers. The humans had lost 8, but the attacks kept coming. The Valorans learned. They stopped charging blindly. They brought up artillery and began shelling the station from a distance. Walls crumbled. Soldiers died. The sky filled with smoke and the smell of burning metal. Jiwoo ran from wounded soldier to wounded soldier, bandaging injuries, administering painkillers, keeping people alive by sheer force of will. His hands were covered in blood, both human and Valoran. He did not stop to rest. Hyunsoo led the defense of the eastern wall. He was too old for this, too tired, too slow. But he stood his ground, firing his rifle until it overheated, then picking up another. When a Valoran broke through the wall, Hyunsoo killed it with a knife. Yuna's explosives ran out by the second day. She started making new ones from mining supplies, working through the night while shells fell around her. When the morning came, she had enough bombs to destroy a small army. She used them all. The battle raged for 3 days. The humans gave ground inch by inch, falling back from the outer walls to the inner buildings. From the inner buildings to the central complex. They made the Valorans pay for every meter with blood. Sora was everywhere at once. She rallied soldiers who were ready to break. She dragged, wounded to safety, while bullets flew around her. She led counterattacks that pushed the Valorans back, buying precious hours for her people. Yira watched all of this from the command room where she was held. She saw humans fight with rifles, with knives, with bare hands. She saw them die and watched their friends step into their places. She saw courage that she had never believed possible. On the third day, Sora was wounded. A plasma bolt hit her in the side, burning through her armor and into her flesh. She fell, and for a moment, the humans' defense wavered. Without their leader, would they break? They did not break. Hyunsoo picked up Sora's rifle and took her place. Yuna ran to the breach in the wall and held it alone for 10 minutes until reinforcements arrived. Jiwoo dragged Sora to safety and began working on her wounds with hands that shook for the first time in days. "Keep fighting," Sora whispered through gritted teeth. "Do not stop. Do not ever stop." By the end of the third day, only 18 humans were still standing. The station was in ruins. Ammunition was almost gone. Food and water were running out. But the Valorans had lost over 4,000 soldiers. 4,000 of their finest warriors, killed by a handful of farmers and teachers and children. Sora pulled herself to her feet despite Jiwoo's protests. She was pale from blood loss, barely able to stand. But she grabbed a rifle and walked to the front line. "One more day," she told her soldiers. "One more day, and help will come." "How do you know?" someone asked. "Because I refuse to believe we have done all this for nothing. Because the universe cannot be that cruel." She checked her rifle and looked toward the enemy lines. "And if I am wrong, then we will die fighting." That is what humans do. In the command room, Yira heard these words. She heard the determination in Sora's voice, saw the fire in her eyes, and she made a decision. She walked to the door and pushed it open. The guard outside turned, surprised. "I want to talk to your commander," Yira said. They brought her to Sora. The human lieutenant looked at her with tired eyes, waiting. "Your people are incredible," Yira said. "I have never seen anything like this. Never believed anything like this was possible." "We are just soldiers," Sora replied. "We are doing our jobs." "No, you are more than that." Yira straightened, standing as tall as her wounded body would allow. "I am a commander of the Valoran Empire. My word carries weight. When the next attack comes, I will stand with you." Sora stared at her. "Why?" "Because somewhere out there, I have a daughter who is learning to be a warrior. And I want her to know what true courage looks like. I want her to know that the greatest enemy is not the one with the biggest army. It is the one who simply refuses to give up. Sora was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded. Welcome to the fight, Commander. Outside, the Valorans were preparing their final assault. They knew the humans were almost finished. One more push, and the station would fall. Inside, 18 humans and one former enemy prepared to meet them. And somewhere in the dark of space, ships were coming. But whose ships were they? The morning of the fourth day broke gray and cold over the ruined mining station. Smoke rose from a dozen fires. Bodies littered the ground, both human and Valoran. The air smelled of blood and burning metal. Lieutenant Sora stood on the last barricade, looking at the army assembled below. The Valorans had gathered every soldier they had for this final push. Thousands of them, stretching across the valley like an ocean of dark armor. It was the end, and everyone knew it. 18 humans stood with her. 18 out of the 200 who had served on the Busan. 18 soldiers who had fought for days without rest, who had watched their friends die one by one, who had refused to surrender even when all hope was gone. And standing among them, holding a plasma rifle taken from a fallen enemy, was Commander Yira of the Valoran Empire. This is strange, Yira said. Fighting against my own people. You do not have to do this. Sora replied. You could go back. They would welcome you. No, I have seen too much, learned too much. Yira looked at the humans around her, tired, wounded, dying on their feet, but still standing. If I go back now, I will have to pretend that none of this happened. That you were just weak creatures who got lucky. I cannot do that. I cannot lie about what I have seen. I read and leave her. I won't of this life. I won't of this happened. Hyunsu laughed, a rough sound from a throat dry with thirst. The Valoran commander has become one of us. Strange days. Strange days, Yira agreed. Below, the Valoran army began to move. Drums beat a steady rhythm. Soldiers marched in perfect formation. Tanks rolled forward, their cannons aimed at the station. Sora raised her rifle. Positions, everyone. Make every shot count. The humans spread out along the barricade. There was no fear in their faces, now only grim determination. They had accepted their fate. They were ready to die. But they were not ready to die quietly. The first wave hit the barricade like a storm. Valoran soldiers poured over the walls, slashing with claws and firing plasma weapons. The humans met them with bullets and blades. Jiwoo fought beside Yuna, protecting her while she armed her last explosives. When a Valoran grabbed her from behind, Jiwoo shot it in the head. Hyunsu held the center of the line, an old man with gray hair and a farmer's hands, killing soldiers a third his age. He was wounded in the leg, then the arm, then the chest. He kept fighting. Yira stood with Sora at the front. Her forearms wielded 2 human rifles and 2 Valoran blades, a strange mix that somehow worked. She cut down her former soldiers with no hesitation, no regret. She had made her choice. I scoffed at the legends, she said between attacks. I laughed at the stories about Terran warriors. And now? Sora asked, shooting a soldier who had climbed over the barricade. Now I understand. The legends are not exaggerations. They are understatements. The fighting was brutal. One by one, the humans fell. Hyunsu went down with a blade in his chest, still trying to reload his rifle. Jiwoo was shot while dragging a wounded soldier to safety. Yuna died, setting off her last bomb, taking 20 Valorans with her. By the time the sun reached its highest point, only 5 humans were still standing. Sora was one of them. She had been wounded so many times that she could barely move, but she refused to fall. It has been an honor, she said to the survivors. All of you. Every moment. Every battle. Every sacrifice. It has been an honor to serve with you. The Valorans prepared their final charge. Thousands of soldiers against 5 wounded humans and 1 traitor. It would be over in moments. And then the sky split open. Ships burst through the clouds, Terran warships, their hulls painted with the blue and white of Earth. They fell on the Velaran fleet like thunder, missiles and plasma bolts tearing through the alien vessels. Dropships followed, screaming down from the heavens. They landed around the mining station in a ring of fire and steel, and Terran Marines poured out by the hundreds. The Velaran ground forces froze, caught between the survivors on the ridge and the fresh army behind them. For a moment, nothing moved. Then Sora raised her rifle one last time. "Terran Defense Force!" she screamed. "Advance!" The Marines charged. The Valorans broke and ran. The battle was over. Sora collapsed the moment the last enemy retreated. Medics rushed to her side, and for the first time in days, she allowed herself to close her eyes. She woke up 3 days later in a hospital ship orbiting Kepler 7. The first thing she saw was Yira, sitting beside her bed. "You are alive," the Velaran said. "The doctors were not sure you would make it." "How many?" Sora asked. Her voice was rough, barely a whisper. Yira understood the question. 7 survivors from the station, plus me. 7, out of 83 who had crashed on the planet, out of 200 who had served on the Busan. 7. Sora closed her eyes. Tears ran down her cheeks. "They will be remembered," Yira said quietly. "All of them. I will make sure of it." Months passed. The war ended not with Valoran victory, but with a negotiated peace. The Terran Defense Force had shown that humans could not be easily conquered, and the Valoran High Council decided that the cost of war was too high. Yira addressed the council personally. She told them what she had seen. Farmers who fought like demons. Children who died with courage that shamed veteran soldiers. A species that seemed weak, but was stronger than anything she had ever faced. "I thought them weak because they were soft," she said. "I thought them foolish because they would not retreat. I thought them primitive because they had no natural weapons. I was wrong about everything." She paused, looking at the faces of the council members. Humans do not fight because they enjoy it. They do not fight for glory or conquest. They fight because they have found things worth dying for: their families, their homes, their friends. And there is nothing in the galaxy more dangerous than that. The council listened. They argued. And finally, they voted for peace. On Earth, a small ceremony was held for the survivors of the Busan. Lieutenant Kim Sora received a medal for valor. Along with the 6 others who had lived through the battle, they stood on a stage while crowds cheered. But their eyes were far away, remembering friends who were not there. Yira stood in the audience, the first Valoran ever invited to a human military function. She watched Sora accept her medal, and she thought about everything that had happened. A year ago, she had scoffed at the legends of Terran warriors. She had laughed at the stories, dismissed them as propaganda, believed that humans were nothing special. Now she knew the truth. The legends were real. Every story, every tale, every whispered rumor about human soldiers who simply would not stop fighting, all of it was real. And if anything, the legends did not go far enough. After the ceremony, Sora found her in the crowd. "I heard you are going home," the human said. "Yes, my daughter is waiting. She has many questions about humans." "What will you tell her?" Yira thought for a moment. Then she smiled. A strange expression on a Velaran face. "Learned from weeks of watching humans, I will tell her the truth. That somewhere in the galaxy, there is a species that looks weak but is not. That they laugh and cry and love and fight with everything they have. That they are the most stubborn, foolish, impossible creatures I have ever met, and that I am proud to call some of them friends." Sora smiled back. "That is a good story." "It is not just a story. It is a legend." They stood together in silence, 2 former enemies who had become something more. Behind them, the sun was setting over Earth, painting the sky in shades of gold and red. Somewhere out in the galaxy, children of 100 species were being told stories about humans, about soldiers who would not surrender, about farmers who became warriors, about a species that looked at impossible odds and said, "Not today." The legends would grow with time. They would be told and retold, exaggerated and embellished, passed from generation to generation across the stars. But those who knew the truth, those who had seen humans fight and die and refuse to give up, knew that no exaggeration was needed. The legends were real. They had always been real. And now, thanks to 83 soldiers who gave everything they had, the entire galaxy knew it too.